Saul was a pretty good king for a while. Then he slipped into sin and disobedience, and so God replaced him with David.
What?
You heard me. Bye-bye. David was a very good king, and during his rule, the Israelites finally seemed to be on track, following God and being obedient. But don't get me wrong, David did have his mess-ups, like the famous Bathsheba incident.
You always have to bring that up.
But overall, David had a great rule and was known for being a man after God's own heart. David set up the city of Jerusalem as capital of Israel, and God promised David that his son would be the one to build the temple, and that David's family would rule forever. So, David died.
What? Get you down here.
And Solomon became king.
Whatever.
Solomon was a great king, and Solomon did build the temple.
Yeah, Solomon is in the house.
But in the end, he blew it all. Yeah, by disobeying God and worshiping other false gods. Solomon set off a chain reaction.
Yeah, chain reaction in the house.
Solomon, it led to the ruin of Israel, though.
You know that?
Yes, she did. After Solomon's death, there was kind of a civil war that broke out between the north and the south of Israel.
Northern Israel leads the rest. The south, you know, is second best.
Guess what I bet?
What, Ariana Stein?
Guess what time it is?
What time is it?
Time for the perfect cheer.
Who's the Israelite that's the best? Who's the Israelite that's the best?
Northern Israelites. We don't want to hear it. We're the Israelites with our spirit.
So go back north and shut your mouth. The coolest trees are from the south. Solid spirit rocks. Woo! Woo! Woo!
Israel was split as a result of Solomon's sin, just as God had warned. Both kingdoms, the north
Good luck.
and the south,
Solid spirit rocks. Woo! 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 Woo!
were led by king after king after king. Almost all bad kings. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew. Until,
You know, wait a minute.
yes, Solomon?
What about God's promise to my dad that our family would rule Israel forever?
Okay.
Those bad kings are
Okay, that was Jesus he was talking about. Jesus is the king that will rule forever.
Jesus?
Yeah, Jesus. We haven't gotten there yet. But anyway, aren't you supposed to be dead?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, where was I?
Further and further.
Further, okay, got it. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew, until scene 8, the exile.
Or
During the time of the king, God had sent prophets to warn the people. These were men sent by God to speak for him, warning the people away from sin.
Please, folks, back away from the sin. There is nothing to see here. Please go back to the God of your ancestors. I know what I'm doing here. I am a trained professional. Please go back to your obedient lives, citizens.
But no dice, nothing worked. So God brought the ruin on Israel that he told Solomon he would. Northern Israel was attacked by a country called Assyria. They were captured and hauled off to Syria as slaves and servants. Southern Israel, now called Judah, was attacked.
who's the coolest up country?
It's Judah. It's Judah.
Who's the coolest up country?
It's Judah.
Was attacked by a country called Babylon.
Solid spirit rocks. Woo! Woo! Woo!
They too were hauled off. They too were captured and hauled off to Babylon as slaves and servants. During this time, lots of interesting stuff happened.
In the news today, a man named Isaiah, claiming to be a prophet of God, announced that a time was coming soon when God would send a deliverer. He said, and I quote, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. His name will be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace," unquote. For more of the story, tune in at 5.
Apparently today, 3 youths, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bubblegum, were thrown into a fiery furnace and survived. More 11.
In a spectacular den of hungry lions and survived. That and other stories at 5.
In Persia today, Queen Esther, queen of Persia and wife of King Xerxes, saved all of the Jews in Persia from total annihilation. Live from Persia, Max Starr.
Reports confirm today that 50,000 Jews and their families have returned to their homeland of Jerusalem. These are the first of the Jews to return after the Babylonian exile of 70 years. A spokesman for the Israelites did confirm they do plan to rebuild the temple. The remainder of Jerusalem, however, lies in ruins.
And so it went. The Jews had been exiled from their homeland. But even as captives in these foreign countries, God still used his people. Time passed, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
70 years after they were taken captive, the first of them began to make their way home. There was a man named Nehemiah, who was still living in Persia at this time. When the reports came back from Jerusalem that the city was in ruins, he was heartbroken.
Heartbroken. King Artaxerxes, you must let me return to Jerusalem so I can rebuild the wall.
You gotta be nuts.
No, but the wall destroyed, the enemy of my people will be free to attack. I must go and honor my God.
All right, go.
Yeah.
And Nehemiah leads us to scene 9, their return to Jerusalem.
Or deja vu. I feel like I have been here before.
Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem with the help of King Artaxerxes and rallied the Jews to begin rebuilding the wall.
Okay, everybody, we must rebuild this wall so that our God will be honored. The city will be strong, and our people will be free to return at last. And the people that live in these lands will know that there is a God in Israel.
And so the Jewish people worked and worked.
Oompa, loompa, loompa-dee, doo. Oompa, loompa, loompa-dee,
Around the clock they worked. They faced much opposition. Enemies of the Jews tried to stop them. And they carried their sword in one hand and their tools in the other.
Wrong hand, Charlie. The other hand has your hammer. There you go. Here you go.
But despite the opposition they faced, they rebuilt the entire wall around the city of Jerusalem in 52 days. During the rebuilding of the wall, Nehemiah became governor, and he led the people in an amazing thing.
Listen up, my friends. The time has come that we must recommit ourselves to God and following His way. We've returned to the promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham. We are finally home. But now we must go back to being God's people and doing things His way.
And in a way that happened. The people recommitted themselves to God and to living His way for the first time in many years. They didn't get it perfect, but it was closer than they had ever been before.
Years passed, 400 to be exact. Not much was recorded during that time, though.
We don't know exactly what happened then, but we do know that Rome, who was traveling the world conquering cities, came into Jerusalem and took it over. They didn't enslave the Jews, but they put a Roman king in charge, and his name was Herod.
Not much else happened during that time. The Jews went about living their lives as did the rest of the world, following God, but never knowing what it was like to have that perfect relationship with God that He had planned from the very beginning.
Until one silent night,
The cry of a newborn baby was heard from the depths of a filthy stable.
But that's the rest of the story. And a good writer always leaves room for a sequel.
So that's it. So that's a rewind. Now, the question I asked before we got started with this was, do you think there's something that you could do that is so bad, so awful, that God would turn His back on it? And when we look at all that happened in the Old Testament, time after time after time, the Israelites pushed God away. They wanted to do things their way. And there was God, time after time after time, one hand waving them back, and the other one holding it out, waiting. He pursued them just like He pursues us. See, God wants that relationship with us. And all we have to do is take His hand.
Let's pray.